0312 p.m. local time over Scarborough Shoal. A Philippine patrol plane holds a steady track above open water when a Chinese Navy helicopter slides into frame not nearby, but within about 10 feet 3 meters. Close enough that rotor wash becomes a threat, close enough that one small correction could turn into a mid-air collision. The Filipino pilot keys the radio voice tight. "You are flying too close. You are very dangerous." But the helicopter doesn't peel away. It paces the aircraft through a tense standoff, a pressure move delivered in silence and proximity, an escalation without a missile, without a shot, without a headline-making explosion. So here's the real question. When warning off becomes a physical maneuver, how far is the next step from an accident to a crisis? Scarborough Shoal isn't a dot on a map. It's a choke point of psychology, law, and precedent, an atoll-like ring of reefs and shallow water on the edge of the South China Sea, where every radar ping and radio call becomes a political statement. For Manila, the stakes are practical. Before their symbolic fisheries patrol, credibility, and the right to operate aircraft and ships without asking permission in waters it treats as its own lawful maritime space. The Philippine side leans on the 2016 arbitral ruling in The Hague, which rejected key parts of China's sweeping maritime claims, and on the broader UNCLOS framework that separates resource rights in the EEZ from freedoms of navigation and overflight. For Beijing, Scarborough is the opposite, a sovereignty pressure point. China asserts control by normalizing presence Coast Guard hulls, maritime militia patterns, and increasingly air encounters that test how far a patrol will bend before it breaks. When China says an aircraft intruded and must be driven away, that language isn't just rhetoric. It's an attempt to set a new default. That's why an aerial warning near Scarborough is never only about safety, it's about rewriting behavior. The Philippine patrol plane is there to document and persist, often with cameras on board, sometimes even with media, to make the encounter public and deny plausible deniability. Then the escalation risk spikes. One rotorcraft pulls too close, one pilot refuses to yield, one side files protests, while the other doubles down, and suddenly the dispute isn't just over reefs, it's over who gets to set the rules in real time. If neither side wants a war, why do they keep rehearsing the first 30 seconds of one? Again and again at knife-edge distance. The cabin lights are dimmed on purpose. Not for drama, because glare kills detail on a camera monitor. Inside the Philippine patrol plane, the crew runs the mission the way you run evidence. Headings logged, timestamps called out, lenses checked, audio rolling. One operator keeps a stabilized camera, trained on the horizon line. Another watches the aircraft's instruments and the sea below for surface contacts. The pilot's job is simple and exhausting. Hold a predictable flight path so nobody can claim you turned into them, and keep enough altitude and separation to avoid wake turbulence from anything that wanders too close. They're not hunting a target, they're proving presence. That's why the radio script matters. Short, clear, recorded. When the helicopter closes, the pilot doesn't improvise, he documents. Too close, dangerous, maintain distance. If the footage goes public later, the words have to match the geometry. Now flip the camera. On the Chinese side, this starts earlier, often as a track on a screen, a call from a controller, a decision framed as law enforcement rather than combat. The playbook is rarely about shooting. It's about shaping behavior. Identify the aircraft. Challenge it. Put a platform in its peripheral vision. Shadow it long enough that the other crew feels the cost of staying. The point is to make persistence feel reckless, so next time the patrol either reroutes, climbs, or stays farther away. And that's the trap both sides understand. If the Philippine aircraft leaves, it looks like deterrence worked. If it stays, the risk of an accident rises minute by minute, especially when a helicopter's rotor wash and sudden lateral moves can turn stable air into chop. So before any escalation makes headlines, the real fight happens here in procedure and restraint. How do you keep a surveillance mission legal and calm when the other side's strategy is to make calm physically impossible? The helicopter appears first as a speck, then as a shape that shouldn't be there high fast, and climbing into the patrol plane's altitude band. The Philippine pilot trims the aircraft and holds course. No sudden turns, no climb that could be framed as provocation. Just a steady track, a steady airspeed, a steady voice on the intercom, eyes on, cameras rolling, call distances. The crew watches it close. At a few hundred meters, it's still an interception. At tens of meters, it becomes intimidation. The rotor disc grows in the window, the fuselage sliding laterally as if measuring the patrol plane's reaction time. The pilot's hands don't change, only his breathing does. If he jerks the yoke, the aircraft's wing can drift. If he freezes, the helicopter can walk closer. Maintain separation, the pilot transmits calm but clipped. You are too close, dangerous. The reply, If it comes, doesn't matter as much as the geometry. Because this isn't about winning an argument on the radio, it's about forcing a decision in the cockpit. Now cut to the other side. Inside the Chinese helicopter, the threat picture is framed differently. The patrol plane is treated as an intruder, something to be herded, not engaged. The crew's mission is to be seen and felt without firing. And then the most dangerous moment arrives, the small correction moment. Rotor wash bumps the larger aircraft's wing. Not a dramatic jolt, just a subtle tremor that tells the pilot the air is no longer clean. The patrol plane counters with micro-adjustments, a degree of bank, a fraction of throttle. Every correction is logged in the pilot's mind as potential evidence later. If this goes wrong, who moved first? Who forced the envelope? The helicopter slides again closer than before, so close that the Philippine crew can read markings and see the crew's helmets through the canopy. That's the point. Make it personal. Make it unmistakable. Force the patrol plane to either break off or accept a risk that any safety investigator would call unacceptable. The Philippine aircraft doesn't turn away, it keeps recording. That's when escalation stops being a headline word and becomes a physics problem. Two crews, two narratives, one shared piece of sky, and no margin for ego. Because if you can't win control of the airspace with law or diplomacy in that moment, what do you use? Endurance, intimidation, or an accident that changes policy overnight? The moment the aircraft lands, the battlefield shifts away from wings and rotor wash into statements, timestamps, and whose version of reckless becomes the international default. On the Philippine side, the response is built like a case file. Flight logs, video frames showing separation, radio audio where the pilot warns the helicopter it is too close and very dangerous. The language is chosen carefully. This is not just a complaint, it's a safety incident that implies coercion. The goal is to lock in two ideas at once. First, that the mission was legitimate. Second, that the intercept crossed from shadowing into unsafe maneuver. From the US and other partners, the wording tends to be broader but sharper, condemn dangerous or unsafe actions, emphasize freedom of navigation and overflight, and warn against coercion that could trigger miscalculation. It's diplomacy with guardrails, trying to raise the political cost of risky intercepts without turning the incident into a direct military confrontation. China's counter is equally predictable and equally important. It frames the Philippine aircraft as having intruded and portrays the helicopter's actions as lawful warning and expulsion defensive controlled, justified. The message is for two audiences, domestic legitimacy and international ambiguity. If Beijing can make this look like routine law enforcement, it normalizes the behavior for next time. And that's the real defensive cycle. Each side is trying to defend not only airspace but the narrative that governs future airspace. Video becomes deterrence, statements become rules. Protest notes become warning shots in slow motion. So the question isn't whether this incident ends, it's whether it teaches either side the wrong lesson, that flying closer works because the other side eventually blinks. This wasn't an air-to-air dogfight, it was a proximity pressure tactic, a helicopter using geometry, turbulence, and intimidation to push a slow patrol aircraft off station. The Philippine plane in most reporting was a Cessna Caravan used for maritime surveillance. It's stable, slow, and designed to loiter low, great for cameras and radios, bad for evasive maneuvering. A shipborne Chinese naval helicopter, often reported as a PLA Navy aircraft, and described by observers as closing to around 3 meters, 10 feet at points, doesn't need weapons to create danger. At that distance, the weapon is physics. Helicopters generate rotor downwash and swirling wake turbulence that can buffet a light aircraft's wings and tail. Close in that disturbance can force sudden corrections, spike pilot workload, and risk a stall if the aircraft is slow and heavy on fuel. And unlike two jets passing with predictable closure rates, a helicopter can hang in a relative position, matching speed, drifting sideways, sliding forward, making the separation problem persistent, not momentary. Then there's the signaling layer. The Philippine pilot's radio warning, "You are flying too close." Very dangerous isn't just emotion, it's documentation. In contested airspace, narratives, recorded comms and video become evidence meant to shape international perception of who acted professionally. China's response typically flips the frame: the aircraft intruded, the helicopter warned off. Two stories, one geometry. So the technical question is brutally simple. When you can't force an aircraft down, do you force it to leave by making staying feel unsafe and dare the other side to keep filming? Incidents like this don't usually change borders overnight. They change behavior quietly and sometimes permanently. First, they raise the operational cost of routine patrols. After a near-contact intercept, every future flight carries new layers, stricter risk thresholds, tighter rules on minimum separation, and more coordination with escorts or nearby surface vessels. Even if the Philippines keeps flying, crews now fly, knowing the other side is willing to compress distance to the edge of safety. That awareness alone is a form of pressure. Second, it accelerates the evidence war. Manila's choice to publicize video and radio warnings signals a shift. If coercion happens in the gray zone, the counter is to drag it into daylight and force international judgment. That pushes partners, especially the US, Japan, and others, to issue sharper statements about unsafe behavior and freedom of overflight because silence becomes permission. Third, the risk of miscalculation rises. The closer the intercepts get, the more the outcome depends on human micro-decisions, fatigue, ego, fear, and split-second control inputs. A collision wouldn't just be an accident. It would trigger domestic outrage, legal claims, and demands for retaliation or stronger escorts, escalation driven by politics after the fact. And that's the paradox. Both sides may insist they want stability, yet the tactics reward the side willing to gamble with inches. So ask yourself, if a helicopter can win a dispute by flying close enough to scare a patrol off station, what stops the next encounter from going even closer until someone runs out of sky? What happened over Scarborough Shoal wasn't a battle of missiles. It was a battle over who gets to set the rules of normal. A Philippine patrol aircraft flew a routine surveillance mission. A Chinese naval helicopter answered with proximity closing to a distance measured in feet, not kilometers, turning air safety into leverage. No shots fired, no wreckage in the water, yet the encounter still delivered a strategic message: we can make your presence expensive, stressful, and risky whenever we choose. And Manila's answer was equally deliberate: document, publish, and force the world to judge the behavior rather than the claim. Because in the gray zone, what matters isn't only what you control, it's what you can prove, frame, and repeat. This is the uncomfortable truth of modern maritime disputes. Escalation doesn't always arrive as a missile launch. Sometimes it arrives as a rotor wash bumping a wing, a pilot gripping the yoke harder, a crew deciding whether to keep filming or turn away. So the takeaway isn't just about Scarborough Shoal. It's about a new kind of deterrence, one that weaponizes distance, ambiguity, and nerves. And now, the question I'll leave you with: when the warning itself becomes the danger, how long can anyone keep calling this stability? Bye for now.